Hello everyone. Today we are going to be looking at algebra, how to solve equations involving sets. Now, for us to be able to solve equations involving sets, we need to remember a bit of, this is a recap, just a reminder of the laws of sets. Now, the first law says here, square root of AB is equal to square root of A multiplied by the square root of B. Then number 2, square root of A over B is the same as square root of A divided by square root of B. Now, in lower grades, 10, 11, you dealt with equations, you dealt with these laws, you were adding, subtracting, and multiplying using these important laws of sets. But in today's lesson though, I'm interested in how to solve equations that involve these sets. So, whenever you see a question that says solve for x or solve for any variable, the idea is to make that variable the subject of the formula. So I'll use these simplest examples I have here to explain the idea. For you to get the concept, then we go to the exam type questions. Now, if you look at this, it says square root of x is equals to 2. Notice this. We want x to be the subject of the formula. And most of you, by now, you know that for us to free x or for us to have x as the subject of formula here, we need to square both sides. So I'm going to do that. Now, if you square both sides, on the left-hand side, I remain with x, and on the right-hand side, I will get 4. Now, I have found my solution to be x is equals to 4 for this solution, for this question here. But I want you to notice something. For us to be able to do this, initially, we have the square root of x as the subject of formula on one side of the equal sign. So when I square both sides, I am eliminating the square root. Now, look at number 2 here. Again, I have the term that has the square root of x on one side of the equal sign. I could solve this by dividing both sides by 2 and push this question to look like the first one. However, for a specific reason, for what you will notice later, I am going to follow the idea of squaring both sides. Since the term that has square root is alone on one side, I am squaring both sides. Now, by squaring both sides like this, I will have, now here, remember laws of exponents. Now, with the laws of exponents, we are taught that ab to the power of m is equals to a to the power of m multiplied by b to the power of m. So, everything that is inside the bracket raised to the power m must be on its own also be raised to the power m. So with that idea, it means having a squared here, it means 2 must be squared and the square root of x must be squared. So in the end, the answer to this now becomes, I will have a 4, then a square root of x, let me put it this way, I will have a 4, then an x, because if you square this from this last part, we already saw that if I square the square root of x, I remain with x, then on the other side, I will have 4. Now, it is now algebra again, I divide both sides by 4, then I get my x equals to 1. What are we learning here? Number 1, for us to eliminate the term that is square root, it must be alone on one side, then I square both sides to have x to be alone. Number 2, when I am squaring the both sides here, I need to remember the laws of exponents, that when I am multiplying the terms and they are raised to a certain power, then each one of those terms, when we are multiplying, is to be raised to the power that is outside. Now, that's done. Then another idea, another question which has another concept is this. If you are given, let's say, square root of x minus 1 is equals to, let's say, 3. And you are asked to solve for x. Like I said, for us to have x as the subject of formula, I need to make sure that the term that has a square root here of x should be alone. So my next stage would be square root of x is equals to 3 plus 1. Now I'll have my square root of x is equals to 4. Now, we have pushed the question from how it was here to what I have learnt as my initial stage, where I can now safely square both sides, knowing that the square root will go away. So I can safely square both sides like that and have my x is equals to 16. That's it. Now, moving further with these ideas, you will find out that in most cases, when you are dealing or when you are asked equations involving sets, you end up dealing with quadratic equations. Whenever you are given equations involving sets, sometimes you end up dealing with quadratic equations. And just to a quick reminder of some things, I won't take much time on this. Equations. The quadratic equations take the general form ax squared plus bx plus c is equals to 0. Now, if you have a quadratic equation like that, so we know how to solve quadratic equations in different ways. Number one, you can solve a quadratic equation by factorization if it has vectors, or number two, by quadratic formula, here, or you can use number three, completing the square. All these are methods that you can use to solve quadratic equations. Completing the square. Let me put the here. So the quadratic formula, if you were to remember it, it says x is equals to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, this now comes to the part of why I have a calculator here. If you are using a Casio calculator, the same way you are seeing things written here for the quadratic formula, when you are doing your substitution, if you use this button here, you will be able to write, it gives you this overline here. So it means you can write the quadratic formula as it is. You can write fractions as they are, which means that you can quickly use your Casio and substitute the values of b, the values of a into this quadratic formula. You use plus first, then later you come back with the replay button. This is the replay button. When you have written something, you can put with the arrows, you can push back and change something. So you can later change the plus to a minus and punch equal to. So this is for the sake of speed. Now, that's on quadratic equations. But why did I take you there? So I want now to move to the exam type questions for this topic of equations involving sets. And with me, I'm going to start by a question from November 2021. The question is solve for x. Now, if you look at what we have, there is a mix of things here. But the concept that we learned just down here is that what I need is to make sure that the term that is a square root must be alone on one side of the equal sign. So that's the first thing I need to do. So if I am here looking at this, I need to make this term to be alone on one side of the equal sign. So it means that I will have my 2 square root of x plus 6 being equals to x. This term here will cross, it becomes minus 2. Now, when I have done this, I have met the idea of having square root of x equals to 2 that we started with. So it means I can now safely square both sides. So I'll quickly do that. If I square this side and I also square this side. Now, remembering the laws of exponents as said here, it means the 2 will also be squared. So I have my 2 squared multiplied by the square root of x plus 6 also squared equals to x minus 2 squared. Now, if I square a 2, I'll get a 4. If I square what is under the root, the square root will go away. I'll have my x plus 6 equals to. Now, the common mistake when people are dealing with questions like this, when you are squaring here, this is a binomial expansion. You need to remember it's x minus 2 by x minus 2. I have seen people, they end up squaring only square x and square this. That is very wrong. This means, this 2 means the bracket here is multiplying itself twice. That's a binomial. So I won't take much of the time on the expansion. but if you need help, please consult. Now, to solve this, I'll end up having my 4x plus 24, this is expansion, is equals to x times x, that's x squared. So if you simplify this, to those who know the shortcut, you end up having your minus 4x here, then plus 4. Now, if you notice here, now we have reached the stage I was trying to put across. If you look at this, I now have a quadratic equation formed here. I'm now looking at a quadratic equation. How do I deal with it? I need to collect all the terms to one side. So I'll say my 0 here is equals to x squared minus 4x, which is this one. Then this 4x here will also cross, it becomes minus 4x. This 24 will cross, let me start writing by writing 4 here. The 24 will cross, it becomes minus 24. So in the end, I have 0 is equals to x squared minus 8x, then minus 20. Now, the mind has a certain orientation, has a certain way it programs things. I like this question. It's the same thing, but I like this one written as x squared minus 8x minus 20 equals to 0. This is me just pushing the question to what I understand better. Now, we are now looking at a quadratic equation, and like I said here, we have many ways of dealing with this question. You can complete the square, you can factorize, you can use the quadratic formula. And I prefer, and also have seen that many of the learners understand the calculator, the use of the calculator on the quadratic formula, so you can still use that. To those who remember, this thing here has factors. So you find someone can simply say x here, also x here, then equals to 0. The factors, two numbers that if I multiply, I get minus 20, and if I add, I get minus 8. Now, that will be my minus 10 and my plus 2. Now, therefore, my x is equals to 10, or my x is equals to minus 2. We have now solved the quadratic equation. Or, if you are to go to a quadratic formula, it simply means that we are saying my x will be equals to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Make it a habit to always write down the formula. Even though you have it memorized in the head, write it down so that when you perform the substitution, you won't make unnecessary mistakes. My a here is 1, my b is minus 8, and my c is minus 20. Now, substituting those, I'll have my minus for the formula here. There is a negative for the formula, but also my b is negative. Please take note of how cautious I am of the signs. Plus or minus the square root of b, which is our negative 8. And watch this. It has to be in brackets because minus 8 squared is not the same as minus 8 squared like this. The answer here is minus 64, and here the answer is positive 64. Please take note. Now, minus 4, my a is 1, and my c from there is minus 20. Then everything over 2 by my a there is 1. Now, there is no need of you to, if you are using a Casio, there is no need of you to start simplifying to write a positive 8 here, a plus or minus here, and also start having a 64 minus 4, negative 4 by minus 20. No, you can use Casio and substitute everything as I said, because a Casio has this button here on it. You can use this and you'd be able to type everything here. So this will simply lead you to have your answers x equals to 10 when you put a sign here plus, then also another one to be x equals to minus 2, the same answers we got here. So by this, you have solved an equation involving surds. So what was needed? The equation involving surds is actually housing a quadratic equation in it. So the concept of squaring both sides to remove the square root simply reduced this to a quadratic equation, which you can solve by any method which you find easier and faster. Now, looking at this second one from 28 2020. We have another example here from 2020. If you look at it, I won't spend much time here. Again, the idea here, already the square root is alone on one side. So this is easier. I square both sides like that. Then from here, I simply have my x plus 18 equals to, if you expand this, it's the same as what we dealt with. You end up having your x squared minus 4x, then plus 4. Everything to be on one side, I'll have my 0 equals to x squared minus 4x, then minus x, then plus 4, then minus 18. So I'll have my 0 equals to, let's change this to another color here. 0 equals to x squared minus 5x, then minus 14. Like I said, the mind has to be sorted well here. So I'll put this as x squared minus 5x minus 14 equals to 0. I just rewrote this equation and put the 0 on my right, the equation on my left, like that. Then here again, you can use quadratic formula, factorize any of the method that you find easier. So here I think we have also factors, and this is equals to 0. Two numbers that if I multiply, I get minus 14. If I add, I get minus 5. That would be a minus 7 and a plus 2 equals to 0. So my x, therefore, my x is equals to 7, or x is equals to minus 2. Again, we have solved an equation involving sets. In the end, we ended up dealing with a quadratic equation. The point is, we are still just simply looking at, is the square root or the term that is a square root alone on one side, then we square. Okay, then on this one as well, not to waste time, if you look at it, the square root is already alone on one side, so it means I can square both sides. Again, like that. I have squared both sides. With both sides squared like that, it means here I'll end up having my x squared, let's have a line here, my x squared minus 5 on the left being equals to, please be careful of the laws of exponents. This one right here is 2 squared by square root of x squared. We said ab to the power of m is the same as a to the power of m times b to the power of m. I'm following that. So here I'll end up having 4x. Then this one crosses to this. I'm dealing with x squared minus 4x plus 5 is equals to 0. Again, here we have factors. I'm solving, forgive me here for only using one method because of not having a calculator that I can display here for now. But with this, the factors are two numbers that if I multiply, I get positive. Okay, I wrote something wrong here. Let me correct this. It is supposed to be a minus 5 right there. So we are looking for two numbers that if I multiply, they give me a minus 5, which is this. And if I add, they give me a minus 4. So that will be a minus 5 and a plus 1. So here my x will be 5 and my x will be minus 1. So done. Now watch the last one that I have for you here. If you look at this question, I will rewrite it for things to be clear. It's x minus 3x to the power of a half, then is equals to 4. If you look at this, from the laws of exponents, there is square root of a is the same as a to the power of half, which means what I'm looking at here is simply square root of x. So let me write that. 3 square root of x is equals to 4. After doing this, I need to remember the first concept I gave there. Square root of x is equals to 2. I need the square root of x to be alone, then I end up squaring both sides, just like that. So I need this term to be on one side of the equal sign. So I have my x, this minus 4 will cross to this side, this 4 will cross and becomes a minus 4. And this one will cross to this side, it becomes a plus 3 root x. Now, if you look at this example now, it looks exactly like what you have in this number 3, option number 3. The idea now is simply to square both sides. So if I square this side and also square this side, I'll end up having, this is expansion, x squared minus 8x plus 16 is equals to, I have to square the 3 also, it becomes a 9x. Please make sure you do not forget this. The exams, they need you to be fast, but at the same time make sure you are accurate, you are correct. And that only comes with good practice. We have touched different questions from different years, but the concept is the same. I need to make sure that the term that has a square root is on one side of the equal sign, but sometimes that term is hidden in some format. We need to know that. Then here it is simply simplifying x squared minus 8x minus 9x then plus 16 is equal to 0. Now from there I have my x squared minus 17x then plus 16 is equals to 0. Again, I can use factorization for this, or feel free to also try it with the quadratic formula. Like I said, use the one that you find faster and easier to understand. You can just feed this in a quadratic formula. I'll quickly show you as well down here. So if I do this, I need two numbers that if I multiply, they give me positive 16, but if I add, they give me minus 17. And the numbers are simply minus 16 and a minus 1. Therefore, my x is 16, or my x is equals to positive 1. Now, this ends the lesson here. We have seen the concept. Whenever you're dealing with equations involving sets, no matter how they look, make sure you simply put the equation, the term that has a square root, on one side of the equal sign. And if things are written in this format, remember also the laws of exponents. And that's what maths does. You learn laws of exponents separately, laws of sets separately. Equations involving sets come in and demand a combination of both. You have seen us now calling the laws of exponents. It is important to notice the integration of these topics, and that only comes by practice. So if you have questions, please drop them, and please comment, share as well. Thank you so much. I hope this will be helpful.